You think you want success. But the way you're living right now says something completely different. Because if you truly wanted it, you wouldn't feel this constant pull away from effort. That subtle resistance that shows up every time you try to do something meaningful. Not loud, not dramatic, just enough to make you pause, delay, and eventually avoid. And the strange part is, you notice it, you see yourself doing it, you know you're wasting time, but you still don't stop. Not because you don't care, but because something inside you doesn't feel aligned with what you think you want. So instead of moving forward, you drift into scrolling, into distractions, into anything that makes the moment feel easier. And for a second, it works. The pressure fades, the discomfort softens, but only for a moment. Because right after that, something else replaces it, a quiet frustration, the kind that doesn't explode, but stays in the background, reminding you that you didn't do what you were supposed to do. And now you're stuck between two things. The discomfort of doing the work, and the guilt of avoiding it. Neither feels good, so your brain chooses the easier option. Again, and this is where most people get it wrong. They think they just need more discipline, more motivation, more control, but forcing yourself harder doesn't solve this, because this isn't just a behavior problem. It's a pattern your brain has learned. Over time, every time you avoided discomfort, your brain made a connection. This is how we feel better. Not by solving the problem, but by escaping it. And the more you repeat this, the stronger that connection becomes. Until one day, you're not even choosing anymore. You're just reacting. Discomfort shows up. You escape, automatically. And slowly, this starts changing something deeper. Not just your habits, but your relationship with effort itself. Things that used to feel meaningful start feeling heavy. Not because they are, but because your brain has started associating effort with discomfort, and anything that feels uncomfortable becomes something to avoid, even if it's important, even if it's exactly what you need to move forward. And this is where it becomes dangerous. Because now, you're not just avoiding work, you're avoiding growth, without even realizing it. And the more this continues, the more your brain starts choosing relief over progress, comfort over meaning, escape over everything else. And if you look closely, that's what you've been doing all along. Not chasing success, but trying to feel better. Trying to get away from that internal discomfort, that pressure, that quiet weight, that you don't fully understand. Which means, what you actually want might not be success at all. It might just be a way out. And once that idea starts settling in, everything begins to look a little different. Because now the question is not, why am I not working hard enough? It becomes, what am I trying to escape from? And that's where this gets deeper. Because the answer to that question is not as simple as it seems. And if you pay attention to what happens right after that moment, when you decide to delay something important, you'll notice a pattern you've probably ignored for a long time. At first, there's a small shift. Your focus moves away, your body relaxes a little, your mind feels lighter, not better, just lighter, like you've stepped away from something uncomfortable. And your brain registers that instantly. It doesn't care that nothing meaningful was done. It only cares that the discomfort is gone. And that's enough, because from your brain's perspective, relief equals success, not progress, not growth, just relief. In the moment that connection is made, a loop starts forming. Discomfort shows up, you avoid it, you feel relief. That relief reinforces the behavior. So next time, you escape even faster. And slowly, this becomes automatic. You don't sit there and think, should I avoid this or not? It just happens. Your mind drifts, your hand reaches for your phone, your attention disappears, and by the time you notice, you're already gone, not physically, but mentally. And this is where it gets dangerous. Because now, you're not just reacting to discomfort, you're anticipating it, before you even begin something important. A part of your brain already expects it to feel heavy, so it prepares an exit. And that's why even starting feels difficult. Not because the task is hard, but because your brain has linked it with something it wants to avoid. And here's the part most people never realize. This has nothing to do with your potential, nothing to do with your capability. It's a learned response, built through repetition, and the more it repeats, the more it shapes your behavior. Until one day, it doesn't just affect your work, it starts affecting everything. Because now your brain isn't just avoiding effort, it's avoiding anything that feels slightly uncomfortable. Even small things, making a decision, having a difficult conversation, sitting in silence, all of it starts feeling heavier than it should. So you delay, you distract, you move away, again and again, and every time you do that, The loop gets stronger. Discomfort, right pointing arrow, escape, right pointing arrow, relief, right pointing arrow, repeat. Simple, predictable, and very hard to break. Because it feels harmless in the moment. You tell yourself, it's just a small break. It doesn't matter. But those small moments are exactly what build the pattern. Not one big decision, but hundreds of tiny ones. And over time, those tiny decisions start shaping how you experience effort itself. Effort stops feeling like something meaningful and starts feeling like something to avoid. And when that shift happens, motivation doesn't just drop, it disappears quietly. Because motivation needs a sense of reward. But if your brain is trained to escape before effort even begins, that reward is never fully experienced. So now you're stuck in a strange position. You want to move forward, but your own system keeps pulling you back. Not aggressively, not obviously, just enough to keep you where you are. And this is where most people start blaming themselves. They think, something is wrong with me. But what's actually happening is much more specific than that. You're not failing. You're following a pattern that was built to protect you from discomfort, but ended up disconnecting you from progress. And if that pattern doesn't change, it slowly starts affecting something deeper. Not just your actions, but how you feel about everything you do. Because once effort loses its meaning, even things you used to care about start feeling different. Once that pattern settles in, something subtle starts changing inside you. It's not loud, not something you notice immediately, but it shows up in small moments. When you finally get time to do something meaningful, and instead of feeling ready, you feel a quiet resistance. Not strong enough to stop you completely, but enough to make you hesitate. And then another thought slips in. Is this even worth it? You don't say it clearly, but you feel it, because somewhere along the way, effort stopped feeling rewarding, not useless, just not satisfying enough. And this is where things begin to shift in a deeper way. Your brain starts changing how it evaluates actions. Earlier, effort meant progress. Now, effort feels like pressure, something that demands energy, without giving much back in return. And when that happens, your system adapts. It stops asking, is this important? And starts asking, is this easy? And if the answer is no, you delay it, you avoid it, you push it further away. Not because you're weak, but because your brain has lost the connection between effort and reward. And this is why even simple tasks start feeling heavier than they should. Sending a message, starting a project, making a decision, none of these are difficult on their own, but your internal response to them has changed. So now, everything carries a slight weight. And over time, that weight builds up, until even thinking about doing something feels exhausting. And this is where people start misunderstanding themselves again. They think, I'm just lazy. But laziness doesn't feel like this. Laziness feels relaxed. This feels frustrating, because a part of you still wants to move, still wants to improve, still knows you're capable of more. But another part keeps holding you back, quietly, consistently. And that internal conflict is what drains your energy the most. Not the work itself, but the resistance before it. And when that resistance becomes constant, motivation doesn't just decrease, it starts disappearing completely. Because motivation needs emotional engagement. It needs that feeling of, this matters. But if that feeling becomes weak, then nothing feels strong enough to act on. So what do? You fall back into what feels easier. Quick distractions, small escapes, things that don't require much from you, but also don't give you anything meaningful back. And slowly, your brain starts preferring that state. Not because it's fulfilling, but because it's predictable, it's safe, it doesn't demand anything, and compared to the discomfort of effort, that feels like a better option. Even if deep down, you know it's not. And this is where the real problem begins. Because now, it's not just about avoiding effort. It's about losing the feeling that effort matters at all. And when that happens, even things you used to enjoy start feeling different, less engaging, less meaningful, almost flat. And that's where the next shift takes place. Not in what you do, but in how you experience everything around you. When that shift fully settles in, it doesn't stay limited to your work. It quietly spreads into everything else. Things you used to enjoy don't feel the same anymore. Not completely gone, just weaker. Music plays, but it doesn't hit as deep. Conversations happen, but they don't fully pull you in. Moments pass, but they don't stay with you. It's like there's a thin layer between you and your own experiences. You're still there, still doing everything, but something is missing. And this is where people start saying, I don't feel like myself lately. But they can't explain why. Because nothing obvious is wrong. Life looks normal, but internally, it feels slightly disconnected, and this is where another loop begins. Because when normal experiences stop feeling enough, your brain starts looking for stronger ones. More stimulation, more scrolling, more constant input, anything that can create a noticeable reaction, even if it's temporary. And the more you rely on that, the less sensitive your system becomes. So now, simple things feel boring, and meaningful things feel heavy. And this creates a gap between what actually matters and what feels engaging, because most meaningful things require patience, focus, time, all things your brain is now trying to avoid. So instead, it chooses what's immediate, what's easy, what feels lighter in the moment, even if it leads nowhere. And slowly, this changes how you experience your entire life. Not in a dramatic way, but in a quiet, almost invisible way. You're still moving forward, but not fully connected to it. You're still interacting, but not deeply involved. And this is where that feeling grows. That subtle emptiness, not because your life lacks something, but because your connection to it has weakened. And this doesn't just affect what you do. It starts affecting how you see yourself. Because when you don't feel engaged, you start questioning your identity. Why am I like this? Why can't I feel things properly? And your mind tries to answer. It starts analyzing, thinking, overthinking, trying to make sense of something that doesn't have a simple explanation. But thinking doesn't fix this. Because this isn't happening at a logical level. It's happening in how you experience things. So no matter how much you understand, nothing really changes. And that's what makes it frustrating. Because now, you're aware of the problem, but still stuck inside it. And this is where the confusion reaches its peak. Because at this point, even when something goes right, even when you make progress, it still doesn't feel the way it should. And that leads to the final shift. The moment where you start questioning whether anything will ever feel right again. And when you reach that point, something unexpected happens. Even when you finally do something right, it doesn't feel the way you imagined. You complete the task, you make progress, you do what you were supposed to do. And for a moment, you wait for that feeling, that sense of satisfaction, that quiet pride, but it barely shows up. If anything, it fades almost instantly. And that's when the confusion turns into doubt. Because now you're not just struggling to act, you're starting to question the value of acting at all. If this doesn't feel good, then what's the point? And this is where most people take a wrong turn. They assume the goal isn't big enough, so they aim higher. They expect more, thinking a bigger result will finally create that missing feeling. But it doesn't, because the problem isn't the size of the outcome. It's the way your system is experiencing it. Your brain's reward response has weakened. Not gone, just reduced. So now, even meaningful progress doesn't register the same way. And without that internal signal, effort starts losing its purpose. So your brain goes back to what still creates a noticeable effect. Quick stimulation, instant distractions, because those still give a response. Even if it's shallow, even if it doesn't last. And this creates one of the most frustrating states. You want progress, but progress doesn't feel meaningful. You move forward, but you don't feel fulfilled. And because of that, you start chasing more, not out of clarity, but out of hope, hoping that something, some result, some moment, will finally make things feel right again. But it never fully does. And that's when the realization starts forming. Very quietly, almost in the background. Maybe it was never about success. Maybe all this time, you weren't trying to build something better. You were trying to get away. Away from discomfort, away from pressure, away from that internal weight. And once you see that clearly, everything starts shifting. Because now, your behavior finally makes sense. You weren't failing to move forward. You were successfully escaping, and the system worked exactly the way it was trained to work. But now there's one final thing left to understand. If this entire pattern was built slowly, then how do you actually break it? Without forcing yourself into another cycle. That's where the real change begins. And once you see all of this clearly, the way out doesn't look like what you expected. It's not about pushing harder. Not about suddenly becoming disciplined. Because that would just create another form of pressure. Another thing your brain wants to escape from. What actually changes things is much simpler, but also more uncomfortable. Instead of reacting instantly, you pause. Not in a dramatic way. Not forcing anything. Just a small gap between the urge and your response. Because right now, that gap doesn't exist. Discomfort shows up. You escape automatically. So the first shift is creating space, even a few seconds, where you don't immediately move away. You sit with it, that slight pressure, That urge to leave, you let it exist, without trying to fix it, without trying to distract yourself. At first, it feels strange, because your system is used to instant relief. But something important starts happening in that moment. You're interrupting the pattern. Discomfort no longer leads directly to escape. There's now a pause, and that pause is where control slowly comes back. Not full control, not perfect behavior, just enough to start shifting direction. At the same time, you reduce constant stimulation, not completely removing it, but becoming aware of it. Less automatic scrolling, less jumping from one thing to another. More moments where nothing is happening. Because your brain needs space to reset its sensitivity. Right now, it's overloaded. Too much input, too many quick rewards, so slower experiences feel empty. But if you give it time, that sensitivity starts returning, and slowly, things begin to feel different. Effort doesn't feel as heavy. Not easy, but manageable. Small actions start feeling slightly meaningful again. Not exciting, but real. And that's enough, because you're not trying to flip everything overnight. You're rebuilding a connection with effort, with presence, with your own experience. And once that connection starts coming back, everything else follows. Motivation becomes more natural. Focus becomes easier. Even enjoyment starts returning. Not suddenly, but gradually. And this is the part most people never realize. You don't need a completely different life. You don't need to become someone else. You just need to stop constantly escaping the one you already have. Because maybe it was never about success. Maybe all this time, you weren't trying to move forward. You were just trying to get away. And once you understand that, you stop running blindly, and start choosing consciously. So the next time you feel that urge, to avoid, to scroll, to disappear for a moment, don't fight it aggressively. Just notice it, pause, and stay, even if it's only for a few seconds. Because that small moment is where everything begins to change. And if something in this made you pause, even for a second, then maybe you're already starting to come back.